Welcome back to FURYCAST. On today's show, I have the comic book creator of titles like Magna and the Posse. He's also a filmmaker. He worked with Liu Kang, y'all, the real Liu Kang. Also in the 90s, during the comic boom, he was employed by Motown Animation. He must know Barry Gordon. He's also a fascinating storyteller and a great guy. On today's show, I have my new friend, John Hervey. Also, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and of course, smash the bell for notifications. You can also comment on this video and let it play to the end. Now we've got that out of the way, here is my interview with Mr. John Hervey.
Yo, what's going on, my man Derrick?
What's going on, man? You're dude. You have quite the resume.
Hey, man. I'm out here just like all of us, especially in H-Town, getting our hustle on.
Grinding in H-Town. Yeah, we're both citizens of the great city of Houston, Texas.
That's right.
So give me a little backstory, man. Let's hop into it. How'd you grow up and what influenced you to get into comic books in the first place?
So I'm actually a native of California. So I was born in Inglewood and I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. For those that don't know LA, it's a part of LA County, but it's northeast of LA proper is where I grew up.
So side note, not to interrupt you.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't know this about me, but I lived out there as well. My first job, I was a paperboy for the San Gabriel Valley Tribune.
Let's go.
I lived in West Covina, baby.
West Co, baby. Okay, so we were out in the Duarte area.
Okay.
So we moved. We started in Inglewood. We moved up to Altadena, and then we moved out to the Duarte area. Duroc.
Mm-hmm.
And if I said Duarte, most people are like, I don't know what that is. Well, so I just say Pasadena area, but it's actually a good 9-10 miles east.
First comic book store I ever frequented, I had a barber in Pasadena, and there was a comic book store around the corner. Yeah, okay. And that's back when you'd walk in a comic book store and they didn't want you to be there.
Right.
They weren't interested in selling things to you.
You're like, how does that work?
It's
like, this is the hard sell. It's like you want to keep all these books for yourself. What do you want? The first comic store I went to was a place on Colorado called Book Village. It wasn't a flat out comic book store, but it was the first store I went to. I mean, it was like the Disneyland of comics for me. Because before that, I was getting comics at 7-Eleven.
Same here.
There was a drugstore called Webster. They had 2 spinner racks, which was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But then at that point, I realized I could go other places. So like, I would try to, there were still some newsstands around. I would try to, frequent some newsstands. There were a couple of bookstores that had some comics. But then Book Village opened up and it was like heaven. That was the first time that I saw a comic book wall, was at Book Village. And they had a whole bunch of books in the back, but the front of the store was all comics. And it was like, it was comic book heaven, man. I'd never seen anything like it before in my life. My friend took me there, was like, dude, you got to check this out. I'm thinking to myself, man, what do they have? Like 4 spinner racks? I mean, it's like 2 spinner racks was crazy to me. I went there and I'm like, they got a whole wall of comics. Oh, snap.
How did they build that? They must be a carpenter. They're a carpenter.
No, dude, they basically built wooden shelving.
Mm-hmm.
So it was basically kind of like a 4-leveled wooden shelving. So from the bottom to the top, and it was just kind of like, so the books were here, then here, then here. So you could just kind of, because you're right, there were no displays back then for that kind of stuff. You either made that stuff yourself or got spinner racks.
Yeah, just kids today don't know the struggle.
Man, they have no idea.
I bought New Mutants 97. Is that the first appearance of Deadpool? Is it 97? I believe right. So yeah, sounds right. From a spinner rack, from a convenience store in Baldwin Park, California. Just rode my bike up there. It's like, oh, it's all flopping over the edge. You just pull it out. You have no idea it's about to change your life.
It's a different world.
So what happened with me, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder here, hop in whenever.
No, you got it.
But so I was in California when Liefeld's Spike Lee 501 Blues commercial hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't into comics, and that really piqued my interest. That he was like 19. He looked 12, but he was probably like 20 years old. Yeah. And he was making comics, and they showed him drawing it. And, and my brother was always into comics. So then I start going to the store, getting stuff from the spinner rack. You being in California, did that affect you at all?
Oh man, big time. It's like,
because they were around the corner, those guys, you know what I mean?
Because they were just down in Anaheim. So, so what ended up being kind of cool for perspective. So when I worked at Motown, that was in the Miracle Mile area. So that was down near the La Brea Tar Pits. So they were published by Image. So we got to meet the dudes at Image Central, which was in Anaheim. So Image Central was kind of like the production hub, so to speak, for all of Image. It was kind of the central hub. But Liefeld Studio was also out of there. So I became boys with Murat Michaels because he was kind of one of Liefeld's like kind of first dudes, that he brought on board. And then on the west, there was Michael Turner Studio. So you had Michael Turner Studio, and you had Top Cow, you had the Cow. So I got to meet some of those cats and hang out with some of those cats. We would go over to the 3rd Street. I'd hang out with Murat. That was a little bit further away, being in Anaheim. He would come out, and let me tell you, man, they were balling back then. I was never balling, but they were balling. So like Murat, I remember he rolled up in some like sports car. I was like, bro, this was comic book money back in the day.
It was crazy.
That was comic book money. This kid was balling.
Pulling up in Lambos from,
just he had a nice sports car. Then we shot up to because Melrose was right there, and Golden Apple Comics was right there. So we shot up in his nice little sports car, went up to Golden Apple, flossed around Melrose for a while, got some comics. I was just like, man, this is good stuff.
I'm gonna make a comic and get rich.
And here we go, and it's like, what, 30 years later, man.
So take me back to your childhood, and were you always interested in writing or storytelling, or how'd that go?
So the funny thing actually is there was a dress shop where my mom would frequent to buy dresses. And I remember, like, it's like, you're a kid. You don't want to go with your mom to the dress shop. She's like, she's bringing me with her. I'm like, oh. I'm sitting there waiting, and they actually, amongst the magazines, they have a Fantastic Four magazine, a Fantastic Four comic. So I read the Fantastic Four comic. I read part of it. I'm not able to finish it, So next time my mom goes to the dress shop, I'm like, I want to come, So I finished reading the comic, and, I was like, do you have any more comic books? She's like, well, we just got them from the 7-Eleven right over there, So I'm like, well, let me go check out 7-Eleven. I didn't know a lot. I didn't know much of anything about comics. I knew Spider-Man from the Spider-Man cartoons from the 60s that they were showing, in the afternoons. I knew members of the Super Friends. So I knew Superman, I knew Wonder Woman, I knew Batman. But I didn't know that the Super Friends were the Justice League. I didn't know that. And then like the old Marvel cartoons, the animatic ones, like the Iron Man and Thor.
Oh yeah.
Wolf ones. So I knew those characters. So I would pick up books just seeing some of those characters. And then across the street from there was a drugstore, and they had a spinner rack. And then they got 2 spinner racks, which is crazy because I'm like, man, bro, mom may only get me 1 book, 2 books on a good day. And there's 2 spinner racks worth of books that I got to choose from. I'm like, bro. So she would go to the drugstore, and I'm like, the way the drugstore was set up, it was almost like 3 or 4 different buildings that were all interconnected. So they're on different floors. So like the drugstore part was kind of at the top, or the liquor store was here. Then the pharmacy was here. Then like the gift shop and the comics were on the bottom floor. So I was down there just reading through and rifling through comics. So my mom was hooking me up here and there. And then, but at this point, I still don't understand it. There's numbers on the books. I get that. there's cool stories, and most of the stories were relatively self-contained, but like places like that, they have no continuity. So they don't have like a buying schedule. So it's like they pick up Avengers 185, they may not get 186. You know what I mean? Because it's not like a comic book shop owner that's buying books for clientele. They're just
I always wondered who was doing the buying of the comic books at the local, not even a 7-Eleven, just like the local independently owned gas station slash corner store. Yeah. Like, who was the person that was in charge of filling those? I've spent time thinking about this.
Well, you know what? So this goes to another one of my adventures, because I did own a comic book store for a while in the 90s.
Well, that's interesting.
In Pomona. And I put some books in I also put some books in a drugstore, liquor store that was in Duarte, because it was close by me and it was easy for me to do. And let me tell you, man, they let me, I brought in a spinner rack, I put in the books. All they wanted to do was sell the books, bro. They had what I put in. That was it. They had no, somebody may come in and ask for something, they wouldn't even remember.
You're right. It must have been a third-party vendor. You're right. It must have been.
They were like, oh man, somebody wanted another one of these books. I don't remember the number. They didn't know, bro. So they were just like, listen, just let me make my money.
Yeah.
Sell these books. So maybe in retrospect, I understood, because I was just like, dude, Avengers 185, I picked it up here. They never did 186, but then they picked up 187. Why? Why are you torturing me?
What happened?
Why are you making my life hell?
What happened with Wonder Man?
I'm telling you, man. So actually, I think the first book that, like, when I said, I think it was Avengers maybe 184 with the Giant Crusher Creel on it. It actually ended up being a John Byrne book. Mm-hmm. That was like the first book where I told my mom, I'm a comic book collector now, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, that's good, baby. Finish your greens.
You came out of the closet, bro, back then?
I came out. She was just like,
for comics?
Derrick, I've seen people get their behinds whooped.
Oh, dude, in school?
It's cool to be into all this stuff now. It was not cool back then.
No, dude, I was going to West Covina High and bro, just like, because you would see a guy and he might have a Wolverine shirt or something, and you'd strike up like the secret conversation. You know what I mean? But like, if you were sitting at your desk in class talking about, stuff that is really like taught in school now, like the Chris Claremont run, and you couldn't talk about that publicly, bro, unless if you didn't want a girlfriend, you know what I mean? But if you
didn't want a girlfriend, if you didn't want to get beat up, you didn't talk about any of that stuff. That was all in the DL. I remember one of my friends, we both saw each other at Webster's, and we were both kind of headed towards a spinner rack, and we both kind of fronted a little bit. Then we both kind of realized, we kind of, dude, are you, oh, really? Okay, cool. Then it's like, to like a secret society.
Yeah, it really
but we
was.
Never talked about it at school, bro.
No, not at all. So what age was that you first went to the dress shop?
Man, that must have been when I was like 7.
7. So now take me into, when did you start writing?
So I started making my quote unquote own little mini comics, almost from that age on. And I made so many, but I used existing characters. Like I told you, I made a ton of Space Ghost comics and, Herculoids comics and all these different kind of characters. So I was always writing. But it wasn't until I hit about the latter part of middle school that it kind of dawned on me that it would be cool to try to create my own stuff. So then, the funny thing is I became a voracious reader and writer, but like before comics as a kid, I didn't like to read much. So my mom, she was okay getting me comics. So I would look at the pictures. Then I got to read it to figure out the rest of what's going on. So I started reading as a result of comics. And then once I started reading, it was on. I started reading comics. I started picking up science fiction books. I was picking up like Pierce Anthony, Isaac Asimov, all this kind of sci-fi stuff. So it just, from there, like comics just propelled me, to want to read more and just create.
Which, once again, I don't know if this was your experience. I assume this was your experience, maybe not in your house, but in society at large. people were trying to keep you away from comics.
Oh, dude, my mom's. I remember my mom's friend. I was reading comics, and my mom's friend literally asked my mom, "Is your boy all right?" I mean, reading comic books. I mean, it was like, that's so remedial, But I'm not.
Exactly. It's a perfect word. That's how they looked at it. I tell my wife, as far as like storytelling, because she loves Friends. And I try to tell her about, like, people really. I try to explain what we're talking about to her. And I said, look, if you look at the first season of Friends, Joey was the idiot. How they let the audience know he was an idiot was he read comic books in the first season.
Read comic books.
Joey read comic books. He'd be sitting there with a comic book. They eventually people got the gist that he's the dumb one, and they just got rid of the comic books. But that was like what, mid 90s that show came out. People were still looking at comic books like something is deficient in you.
You're an idiot.
Yeah, you're dumb. Mm-hmm.
You're an idiot. You're reading comics. You're reading, instead of reading big boy books.
Yeah.
You're reading comics.
And now
I'll tell you though.
Go ahead.
Comics, man. So I used to read my comics with a dictionary because, these dudes back in the day that were writing, whether it was Claremont, I know Dave Michelini was the guy that wrote part of that Avengers run. These guys were auteurs, man. These guys knew how to write. And I would read these comics and I'd be looking up words, see what these cats are talking about. And it got me into the habit of doing that. Then I started doing the same as I started reading fiction and nonfiction. And it just kind of helped me to expand and grow. But comics, man, without comics, I don't know where I would have gone in terms of reading, because I really had no desire, to read or for storytelling.
So then you're in high school, you're on the DL with comics, although you're out and proud at home.
Yes.
All the greens you could eat.
Exactly.
And were they mustards or collards?
Oh man, they were collard greens.
Collards. Oh my! If your mom can make them right.
Oh, she can make them right,
bro.
She'd make them in with that bacon. Forget about it.
Bro, people don't even know. People have no idea.
I have no idea.
With the bacon greens, with the fat on it.
Like magic.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Like magic.
They are good. So we took a side. We took a side. In the soul food. But,
exactly.
So you're making little comics on your own.
Mm-hmm.
When did you kick it up a notch, or what's your journey? Because I know you did end up with Motown for a bit, but what was the steps in between doing that and kind of working with Motown?
So, honestly, the whole time. So like, I went to school, I wasn't studying anything that was creative. I don't know, maybe if I grew up today, maybe I would have, I was.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that all the time too, how people like try to get you into creative fields now.
Dude, we were all told that you need to go make a living, that you need to be able to take care of your situation. And with my home life, it was just me and my mom. So I knew I had responsibilities. I knew I had things I needed to be able to take care of. So my focus was always making sure that I could do that. Getting a buddy of mine actually became basically an editor over at Motown Animation, and he got me the gig over there. So
and how were you there? This is after college, or did you go to college, or?
This was during.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great gig while it was going. Michael Davis, who was kind of one of the founders of Milestone, he set this up with Motown because at this point, Milestone had folded up, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately is the word, because I've still got Milestone comics in a long box right now.
Man, that was I don't even know how to put it into words, man. When Milestone Comics came out, it was almost watching like an impossible dream. It was one of those things where you're like, man, this is possible. So this means it's possible for anybody to make comics. So it was definitely kind of sad when that didn't stick. But then Michael Davis, he brought a bunch of kids from New York with him from his studio. And my buddy, who was a West Coast guy, he got hired on. My buddy, when I knew from high school, he brought me on, and that was a great trip. I learned a lot, especially working under Michael, working under that crew. Learned a lot about editing, learned a lot about writing comics. It just further fueled my love for comics. But the challenge was kind of once that folded up, you know, I needed to earn, and I couldn't translate it or parlay it into any other kind of consistent work. So, you know, I loved comics, but it wasn't something that I could do. You know, I wasn't able to make that jump to be able to do it full time.
Yeah.
So you know, I had to do like the majority of society. I just had to work.
So while you were at Motown Animation, were you able to produce anything?
Yeah. So there are a number of books that I was an editor on, but I was a co-writer on Trouble Man. So Trouble Man, this was published like in '95. It was published through Image. So that was the first time like I actually got published in a book, and I was like, this is cool.
How'd that happen?
Man, I was like, it was kind of funny because I was really an editor. I was a gopher that became an assistant editor out of necessity. And Michael Davis was very, very open to me from the beginning. He's like, listen, you know, I got the job and I had all these ideas and things I wanted to do and write. He's like, listen, what I need you to do right now, I need you to go get me some donuts. I need you to go get me some coffee. That's what I need you to do. Because I was a gopher. You know, so like I was a gopher, but I was always trying to pitch stuff. And he's like, can you just go make these copies, bro? Can you just do that? Can you just do that? So, but he, you know, it's funny. I did have some fun times with him. I mean, one time he took a meeting with Coolio. This is when Coolio was big. Remember Gangster's Paradise?
Remember it. It's like you couldn't get away from it.
So Coolio comes in to Motown.
With the hair and everything, huh?
With the hair and everything. And we're making comics, and he's like, you know what? I want to be a superhero. So, okay, what's up? He's like, and I have an idea. I have an idea for an origin story. Like, okay, well, what's up? He's like, well, what if, let's just throw some ideas around. It's kind of like a riff session. What if I took some radioactive crack?
Cool.
Got my powers.
Cool.
And me and Mike Davis, I'm looking at my boss. He's looking at me. He's looking at me like, that's funny, but don't laugh. You know, so I'm sitting there just trying not to bust up as this dude unfolds the story of how he takes radioactive crack and becomes basically like the ghetto Spider-Man. You know, he's like the ghetto black Spider-Man. Needless to say, that didn't happen.
Okay, yeah. Wow. Well, and he was such a big deal. There's no way you could just say, you just have to say, oh, well, think.
No, exactly. I mean,
crack.
That's what Michael was doing.
He was so big.
He's like, yeah, okay, well, you know, let's get the team together and we'll talk about that. John, you taking notes? And I'm just like, radioactive crack.
I got it.
You know, so basically you're Pookie meets Peter Parker. You know,
oh my Lord, yeah.
I'm
Have the
like
scene when he's crying doing the crack. Put that in the comic. You know?
But what ended up happening is I was assistant editing on a book, and one of the writers ghosted. And back in the day, you would put the studio, they would put their solicitations in Diamond Previews.
Mm-hmm.
And once you started that process, the clock was running. Like the worst thing you could do is have your stuff in the solicitations, then your book not come out on time.
Yeah.
So the clock had started running and this dude ghosted. So Michael Davis came to me and he was like, it was a Thursday, I'll never forget it. He's like, listen, I need you to go home and I need you to work on a full script for the first issue of Trouble Man. And I need to have it back here by, I need you back here by Tuesday. He's like, no stress. He's like, but if you blow this, don't worry, you'll never be working in this town again. So I didn't tell him this until years later, but me and Chuck Drost, who's the artist, we've been working on that story for a year and a half. I'd go to, so little background, all his team was from New York. None of these kids could drive. So they all lived within a couple blocks of the studio. Okay, I mean, he literally took these kids out of New York and we just came to LA. So like, I would tool them around in my ride. We would go like afterwards, we would go to one of their places. So I would always go to Chuck's place. And, you know, we would riff off ideas, and his story, Trouble Man, was an awesome one. So I had all kinds of stuff already written up. I already had an issue 1 written up. I didn't tell Mike this till years later. So I already had the stuff written up, but he told me not to come back till Tuesday. So I just touched it up, refined it, bounced it off Chuck, made sure everything was tight. He was good. Man, I was probably by Friday evening, I was good. I was done. Chuck was happy with it. I was happy with it. So I show up on Tuesday, act like I hadn't slept for 3 days, give Mike the script. He reads it. He's like, this isn't half bad. Okay, we're going to go with this. You know, years later, I told him that. He's like, man, you bastard. But I was like, hey.
So that comic comes out. It's in stores, spinner racks, wherever
Right.
it is. How did that feel to walk in a comic store or 7-Eleven or wherever it may be and see your comic, be able to pick it up?
It was amazing. So it was a 3-issue miniseries. Unfortunately, the company ended up folding up. So we actually had 6 issues planned for it. I wrote all 3. I ended up getting let go because they were cutting personnel down. So by the time the books hit the shelves, I was no longer working there. But they honored everything. My name was still on it. They didn't cheat me or anything like that. So it was cool to have my name on the books, but it was hurting. I was hurting because I was like, man, I'm no longer there. And, I just didn't have an inroad. I had some buddies that were in comics, but I hadn't done enough work. And I understand it that anybody was going to be like, hey, let's pick this kid up. And this is in the latter part of 95. So the comic book industry as a whole was headed down. I mean, like it's off of its peak. I remember at the peak,
The bubble had
early 90s,
burst a little bit.
Yeah, in the early 90s, Spawn was like a 1 million unit book. Everybody was kind of high on that. But now the bubble had burst, the speculative market, was kind of dying away when people realized these books aren't going to retain their value. So the market was going down. So companies weren't hiring folks. They were kind of trimming down the staffs that they had.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of a tough time, in that regard. I was grateful that I had the opportunity to get published. But from there, man, work was very sparse.
You had said something earlier that I thought was interesting, that you had all these ideas and ambition, but he just wanted you to get coffee. Now, personally, I feel like that's awesome because you're in the room.
Yeah.
And you've got your foot in the door because you're in the room. But I hear like a lot of, kids today talking, and they talk about internships and like, well, I don't want to just go somewhere and get coffee. And they're kind of downplaying it. How do you feel about that?
Well, the thing they got to realize is that, like, even with Michael, and he wasn't trying to diss me. He was like, listen, he's like, I have a whole bunch of stories that I'm trying to get out. And the company has a whole bunch of stories we're trying to get out. He told me himself, he's like, I'll never get all the stories out of myself that I'm trying to get out. He's like, so I'm hiring you to assist in this process, but you can learn and you can meet people and you can grow. And that's really what business is about at the end of the day. It's about people. You get to meet folks, you get to grow. And that's why an internship is valuable if you have it, but if you go in there and you have a bad attitude, then guess what? The people that will be your connects, they don't want anything to do with you. So you've wasted your time and their time. If you go somewhere and you're just like, you know what? I need my shine. I need you to put me on 100% right now. And if not, I'm out of here. Who do you think, you may be working with in the future?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. So I started, putting together a cage for a mixed martial arts event. And it was a jiu-jitsu friend of mine. I teach Brazilian jiu-jitsu and a couple other things now, but a buddy of mine who was a jiu-jitsu friend said, "Hey, I'm gonna start throwing fights." So I was on the cage crew. One day they come to me, "Hey, can you judge?" So I end up judging a bunch of MMA fights. Then I become the matchmaker, and then I kind of left that and pursued the things I wanted to do, filmmaking and things like that. But that guy now is an executive at the UFC, my jujitsu buddy, So I mean, just imagine. No, I'm not gonna put up your cage. All he needed was strong backs. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
So I think the connections you make, that may benefit you now or may benefit you 8 years or 10, 20 years from now. You never know. And it sounds like at Motown, you made a bunch of valuable friendships and connections.
That's right. And because sometimes people ask me, even with the books that I'm making now, they're like, "Oh, how are you able to get a hold of the talent that you've gotten a hold of?" A lot of it was through people. It's like, if you're trustworthy, then somebody knows somebody. And then you can reach out to them and like, "Oh, okay, so and so, your boy Jason Medley said, you're good, you're cool, that's how the world works. It's all connection. And I think you'll appreciate this since you're an MMA guy. So one of the dudes I grew up with was Herb Dean.
Word.
So Herb was a comic book guy too. And that's how Herb and I connected. So it was one of those things where it's like, "Oh man, you like comics too? Okay, that's dope. That's dope." He collected Daredevil. And I was at his house when I read the Frank Miller run. I read his floppies.
Wow.
I mean, you know how you have like those seminal moments, like you remember where you were when you saw something or something. Like I remember where I was when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. Me and my boy, we were ditching school. We were over at this one burger joint, So it's like you have those memories. Well, I remember because Herb's like, "You have to read this." So I went over to his house and I read. He had the whole run. I read the whole thing, bro. And like I remember because I'm sitting there literally on his bed and like reading, like Bullseye just jamming up Elektra, and like my heart sank. I was just like, "Oh snap!" And then she's like crawling through the city, and I'm like, "Oh, she ain't gonna make it." Oh, So just
that's crazy, man. Herb Dean,
but a genuine dude, always been.
Yeah. So you were at Motown.
That's right.
They closed up.
That's right.
You're kind of like in no man's land, taking jobs here and there. What was next for you?
So, by this point, I'm just kind of working a steady job. But I got the love. I love comics. So I had some ideas.
You kept just kind of honing your craft on your own.
You know what? I never stopped writing. And at no point did I stop writing. I was always writing. So that's always just been ingrained in me since I was little. So I was always creating. I was always writing. And I had one idea. I actually wrote it, and I started writing in different mediums. So comics, that's my favorite medium. I started writing, just being in LA, everybody's writing scripts. And so
script. Yeah.
So I wrote a number.
Were you at Starbucks? Were you at Starbucks with all the other writers? And then the actors are right there behind the counter at Starbucks, and then the screenwriters.
Exactly. And the screenwriters are at the table.
Yeah.
But I was too cheap to even do that. I would just, the weather's nice. I just go outside.
Free Wi-Fi, baby. Free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. But it was one of those things where I was always writing. So, and I was always creating. I remember, and it started when I was young. I remember my mom, she brought out like this big old notebook. She kept a whole bunch of my writings. Like the notebook was like one of those giant sized notebooks that wouldn't even close. I mean, I had written so many different stories, created so many different characters, or just wrote stories about characters that I loved. And she's like, "This is just some of them," because that's what I would do. I mean, me and Herb, we would watch Kung Fu theater. So we would either, if we weren't at each other's house, we'd do it over the phone. We actually watched Kung Fu theater over the phone. So we'd be watching Kung Fu theater, maybe drawing and watching Kung Fu theater. And then like pretending to do martial arts with like that. Yo, Kung Fu. It's no good. Mine is better.
Yeah, in the backyard.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, those are the good old days. Yeah.
It's like, oh,
Good old days.
jump.
So,
but I always wrote. So I got to a point where I had some ideas of mine that I wanted to keep. And Black Tiger is the first one where I said, at this point, my now wife, she was my fiance, and we had gone on a little vacation. And when we would go on vacations, oftentimes we would take books, and I would also get like graphic novels. We would just like chill out. You know, we would read, maybe be out near the beach, just read or whatever. And I told her, I said, I've got this idea for a story. And I said, and I'm like, in LA, you're always pitching. So, pitching comic book stuff, pitching TV stuff, pitching movie stuff. I said, I'm not pitching this. Like, this is an idea that I want to keep. And that was Black Tiger. So it was a story that came to me relatively quickly, then really started to enhance it and refine it. And it just has all my childhood loves in it. I mean, it's a martial arts story, so you have basically, it's superhero elements. You've got a mantle, just like you have the mantle of the Batman, but you have the mantle of Black Tiger, but instead of it just being one guy, and I know different people have held the mantle of Batman, but Bruce Wayne is the Batman. Black Tiger has been handed down through centuries, so there's different people that have held the mantle of being the Black Tiger. And you get to the present, and kind of where the story takes you is to what seems to be the first female holder of the Black Tiger power. And kind of her trial is, she's learning this bone-crushing supernatural kung fu, and she's got to figure out the mystery of the death of her father. And it's just a fun, it's a fun kung fu inspired, kind of a thrill ride.
Now, just for clarity, you're talking about the comic, because you also did a short film, correct?
So the short film was basically, the comic came first. So I made the comic, made Legacy of Fury, which was a 6-issue miniseries. As a result of that, one of my friends who was a filmmaker was just like, dude, we need to make this into something. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. But he was the guy to do it. I'm a writer, and that's kind of my wheelhouse with that. And then we were able to reach out to some folks. I had met, and I was friends at that point. I was friends with Robin Shue, who was Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat, because we went to the same gym, Bally's. We worked out at Bally's, and we worked out at the same time. So I just started talking with him. We got really cool, and he's still a good buddy of mine. So he's like, hey, look, if you're gonna do a project, I'll support you. So I was like, man, that's dope. Okay, we got Robin Shue involved. And then I needed a character for my lead female character, Jen Fong. Needed somebody that was athletic, who could fight, and even if she didn't know martial arts, be athletic enough where she could be taught enough to sell it. So I was like, I found Angela Fong, who was at the time I think she just finished her kind of tenure at the WWE. And we got into contact. I showed her what I've been up to. She was in Florida wrestling. We ended up putting this short together, whatever happened.
You shot it twice. So you shot the short.
So it was actually,
because I've seen it on YouTube, because you have it on YouTube.
So that's the second short. Hunter Hunted is actually the second short.
Okay, so that was a short before
that was a buddy of mine from LA. And he came all the way through, and he made sure that thing got done. But a couple years before that, we had shot one called Black Tiger, and the subtitle was Salem's Road. And it was basically a prequel to that story.
Same actress?
Same actress, same cast.
Okay.
Same folks. Just say for a couple of folks who were different. And we shot the whole thing, and never got the footage. Dude that shot it, I don't know, he just kind of bugged out. And
welcome to filmmaking.
That was that. I don't know if the footage got destroyed or if he's whatever, but he just disappeared. And this was somebody that we met, like there was a bunch of us that met at San Diego Comic-Con, and we just kind of all had a similar interest. And that's kind of how we started going down that path. But fortunately, everybody was cool. Because I was really dejected about it, bro. I mean, it was hard. We did full guerrilla tactics. We took a long time to get this thing planned. And, you know, we had no budget. So everything was guerrilla. You know, the locations, we basically stole them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean,
Lion Killer, my movie.
Yeah.
Check it out, man. I mean, so many. There's a big like love montage shot at a carnival. We just shot the carnival. We just showed up. Who's carnies aren't going to stop you. And if a carny stops you, you give them $5. You know, like they're not going to stop you at a carnival. You know what I mean? So, but the scene looks great. So, dude, I'm all about stealing locations and, you know, straight running gun, you know, do it as cheap as possible. You know, that's why like I try to do as much as possible as far as like pre-production, production, like do as many jobs as I can myself for reasons just like that. So you got the second one done.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And your wife co-executive produced that with you?
She did.
My wife produced Lion Killer with me. What was it like working with your wife?
You know, it was really good because my wife, man, she's super supportive. So she was 100%. You know, I mean, she's already just naturally, she's a great editor. So she still works with me on my comic books. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, and we had to work on it together because, like, I mean, you know how it is when you're piecing these things together. You know, it's like, first of all, it's already guerrilla, and you need as many people as you can trust to try and get this thing over the finish line, because it's hard enough as it is. And that's kind of what happened with the first one. You know, it's just like some things just end up in the hands of folks that it shouldn't have been in the hands of. And you think that just because you got it in the can, bro, that's only the first start. That's only the first part of it.
Now the real work begins. Well, getting it in the can is a nightmare in itself, but just once it's in post, it's nothing but hard work.
That's right.
Daily grind. I probably worked at it. It was 8-hour days for months on Lion Killer. I mean, months and months, you know. So you've been making comics at this point. You're making movies.
Mm-hmm.
When did you come to Houston?
We came to Houston in 2019.
So now you're in H-Town.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about your two projects, Magna and the Posse. Give me the pitch, baby. You're from LA. You're from LA.
Gotta have a loud mind. So Magna is the story of a young woman, an extraordinary young woman who finds herself. She learns a devastating truth about herself, that she's adopted. This sends her on a journey of self-discovery. And this is a period piece, so it takes place in 1942. So you have the backdrop of World War II. So as she's discovering these things about herself, she finds herself amidst a disheveled band of the last of the world's pantheon members. So Egyptian, Greek, Assyr, Chinese, and they're all fighting for their survival. So as she's unlocking the truth of who she is, she finds herself entangled and entwined with these guys. So this is really a story of self-discovery for her. It's a story of kind of becoming a hero. So it's a fun story. It's a lot of fun elements. Very much a high fantasy type story. You've got the deities and the demigods, and you've got the backdrop of World War II, which I always find horrific and fascinating.
Now, what about the Posse? That's another IP of yours. Tell me about that.
So the Posse is set in the present day, and it starts off with my two main protagonists are Devin Willis and Ulysses Sanchez, and they are rival gang members who find themselves incarcerated in a privatized prison. And as lifers, there's experimentation being done on the lifers there. So these guys end up manifesting powers and inadvertently end up leading a break out of the jail. So everyone that's gotten powers, you know, is now released into the city. And this city is my version of New York. So where New York has 5 boroughs, my Decapolis has 10 boroughs. And each borough has its own magi, so its own kind of crime structure. So like everything is turned on its head. You got all these superpowered guys that have hit the streets. The city basically goes into mayhem, and the crime structure is turned upside down on its head. And what ends up happening is Devin Willis, Ulysses Sanchez, and a collection of other folks, ergo the posse, that come together. They got to put aside their differences and they got to save their own city.
You've been pitching for a while. You got it down, man. As a Black comic book creator,
yeah,
why'd you choose to be part of a hate group? I'm saying that facetiously. But seriously, how's CG treating you? How's it
so
going?
I'll tell you how I got.
I was trying to say that with a straight face, but I thought you might take me seriously. Like,
no,
we had a good interview that I just like,
I know.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean?
You're like, this whole thing was a setup.
Yeah, I was like, he might actually think it's a setup. Let me,
No, so I mean, the way I got involved with CG is actually this one dude was like, hey man, I'd never even heard of CG. And one dude was like, I'm trying to do my books. And he's like, well, just make sure you don't, you don't look into CG. These guys are a hate group. And I'm like, who are they? It's Comicscape. And I'm like, well, why? He couldn't give me a good reason why. He's like, they just are. So I'm like, okay. So I start kind of looking at some of the posts, and I'm like, it doesn't seem that bad. And I had a Kickstarter going at the time, and my Kickstarter was it was dying on the vine. And I'm like, well, these guys seem to have a community. My stuff isn't working. So I reached out to John Maley. And John Maley's like, sure, you can come on my show. So I hop on his show, right? And he kind of live on the show, he just breaks a whole bunch of stuff down to me. He's like, well, you may not get very many backers from this show because your stuff's on Kickstarter.
Yeah, the whole apartheid on Kickstarter.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing that he did that was cool was he was like, but let's go through your campaign. And he went through my campaign page and he was like, he gave me a lot of pointers on how to make my page better. So I did make the changes on my page, and I did end up, at least barely, but I ended up making my goal for the Kickstarter. So I was like, well, that's cool. I'm like, the dude didn't get anything out of helping me. I'm not even a part of, of anything at that point. I literally, even though I was on there, I was like, look, I don't even know what y'all are. I just saw, this is going down, and asked you to be on, and you're gracious enough to have me on. And he told me what was up. And I said, okay, this is cool. Then I started meeting more folks. And at the end of the day, the majority of folks are just trying to make books and get good books. It's real simple, and then somebody will say something. And then I've had some friends like, hey, dude, so-and-so said this. I'm like, so-and-so's grown. They'll say whatever they're going to say, man. I mean, it's like, if you're a Republican, do you co-sign on everything that every Republican says? If you're a Democrat, do you co-sign on everything every Democrat says? Nah, bro. Everybody's an individual. I said, but as a whole, this is what I'm down with. I'm trying to make good books. I'm trying to back good books, and real simple, and just try to be a part of a community that's all about making good content.
So we're running out of time here, but I want to ask you your whole journey to today. What's the lessons you want to pass on?
First thing is the same thing I told my son. I said, I'm a man of peace until I can't be. People need to be people of peace. Yeah. You need to let some stuff just go. People are getting offended about everything. You don't need to be offended about everything. You don't need to make everything into your, into your own personal crusade. It's okay for people to have thoughts that are different than yours, and you can be friends with them too. It's okay. In terms of just lessons in general, we live once. Go for it. If you want to create, then create. The beauty of these different communities that are out here is that there's support. Honestly, somebody asked me about CG. I said, I think it's the biggest comic book support group that's out there, because there's somebody that does almost any need you have, somebody knows about it. Somebody knows how to do that. So you can, if you're looking to, improve your abilities as a writer, if you're looking to produce a book, all the resources are out here. No matter, or you're looking to make a film. I mean, look at you, man. I mean, all the resources are out here, and there's never been a better time than now to be an independent producer of whatever it is you're producing, whether it's comics or animation or live action. There's never been a better time. So my thing is, if you got a story to tell, then get to telling your story.
Awesome, man. Is there anything you want to promote? Final words? Anything you want to tell the people to support?
Yeah, I've been streaming much more frequently on my YouTube channel, which is Beyond Time INC. I like to do things that are educational from the perspective of helping people to create books or create content. I like to do put content on there. So if you want to watch like some of the animatics and live action stuff, and we're looking to make more of that, that'll be on there. So I appreciate your support. If you love comics, pick up Black Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Volume 1, and the predecessor book, Black Tiger, Legacy of Fury. They're in demand. And also Magna and the Posse are in demand. So I've got, I guess in total, it's 5 books between the 2 campaigns. So go ahead and give our books a try. I think you'll like them.
Awesome. Where can people contact you?
Contact me at Beyond Time INC. That's on Insta and that's on Twitter. Easiest ways to reach me. I am on the Facebook too at beyondtimecomics.com.
There you have it, people. From the man, the myth, the legend, John Hervey, H-Town, not made, but representing. There it is. I want to thank you for being on the show today, man. And let's definitely connect and go buy some comics or something sometime, man.
Most definitely, bro. Let's do this.
Well, there you have it. My interview with my new friend, Mr. John Hervey from Beyond Time Comics. Make sure you like this video, comment, subscribe, and of course, smash the bell for notifications. You can also watch my award-winning debut feature film. That's right, I made a movie. It's called Lion Killer. It stars Regina Ting-Chen, who's currently on season 4 of Stranger Things. You can watch it at Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Freevee, the Roku channel, or you can pop on over to the YouTube channel called V Movies. I'll be back next week interviewing another creator. Till then, peace.